I will start with a warm welcome, a literal warm welcome in the case of the Netherlands, because I don't know how it is in the other countries from which the people are logged in, but here outside it's about 30 degrees. So it's a very warm afternoon, and I guess that also means that the people who are now logged in, sitting inside, following this webinar, are in any case the most committed people to this struggle for the domestic workers. So yeah, a warm welcome in that sense too. And yeah, before we start, maybe some practicalities, as I just said. The first practicality is the language, yeah, we will have guests from different countries, which also means that you can follow this webinar in 3 different languages if you like. The main language that we're going to speak here is English. But we also have Spanish translation and French translation. And to be able to hear the translation, you will need to go to the interpretation button, which is at the bottom of your screen. And if you want to, yeah, also if you want to hear the English version, you will need to click the interpretation button and then click the language that you would like to speak in and that you would like to listen to. So everybody who would like to listen in English has to click the English button, French, the French button, and Spanish, the Spanish button. So please, everybody, go to the bottom of your screen, click the interpretation button there, and then click the language that you would like to hear this webinar in. I'll give 2 seconds maybe for everybody to do that. And then the second practicality is about your participation as attendees. Yeah, webinars tend to be a bit static, but we have tried to make it as participatory as possible. As I said, we will have very interesting guest speakers today, and you will be able to ask them questions at any moment through the Q&A button, which is also at the bottom of your screen, more at the left-hand side. There you will see Q&A. You can click it to see how it works. There you can pose questions. And not only can you pose questions, you can also vote for questions, which for us is very practical, because maybe because of time restrictions we will not be able to ask all the questions, but at least we will be able to ask the most voted questions. So even if you don't have any question yourself, please check this Q&A section to vote for the question that you find the most interesting, and we will be asking those questions to our speakers. And then the third thing is on the hosting of tonight. As you can see, my name is Marten van den Bergen. I work as advisor trainer for FNV. I will be one of the hosts for tonight, together with my colleague Rebecca, which is for me on my right-hand side, but I'm not sure how you all see her. Rebecca, maybe you can say something, wave in the camera so everybody knows who you are. So that's Rebecca. And then we also have Challing.
Hello, everyone. Yes. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the webinar.
Yeah, and we made a division of our hosting services. I will do the first part, and then Rebecca will do the second part of the webinar, and we will support each other, obviously, in the different parts of the program today. Challing, which is our colleague from the International department, will help us with the questions. He's now waving in the screen. And we are also live streaming through our Facebook site from FNV at this very moment. So we're not only with the people who are here with the 56 people are here, but also on Facebook, people are able to see us, and we have our colleague Ramon, who is checking what is happening there. So if there are questions through Facebook, we will also be able to post them here. Ramon, I don't know, maybe you can also wave to the people present. And yeah, those, we are only the faces. Yes, hello, there's Ramon. Hey, Ramon. These are the faces of the hosting, but obviously the organizational team were many more people, especially, of course, the Migrant Domestic Workers Network of the FNV has been very active in the development of this program. And maybe the members of the network can also put on their cameras for a moment to show everybody that that they're there. In any case, Joy, are there any other people from the network present? The Migrant Domestic Workers Network? You can put on your camera if you want. Oh yeah, I see some hands raised in any case. But yeah, they will have an active part also in the program, so you will get to know them soon. And yeah, talking about the program, we have a very interesting program, and we will start with a welcome by Renate, who is the team leader at the services sector of the FNV, and also in her function responsible for the cleaners and the domestic workers campaigns going on. So she will welcome us all and introduce us maybe also a bit to to FNV's position on the struggle of the domestic workers. Renate, can I give you the floor?
You did, yes.
I just
Thank
did.
you. It's good to see everybody. I saw a lot of people in the participants that I know, and it's very good to see you. And welcome everybody to this seminar on International Domestic Workers Day, that is today. And we said it's a day also celebrated around the world by many domestic workers. As Martin said, I am Renate Bos. I am a team leader for services sector, which is cleaning, but also security and flex at FNV Union. And unfortunately, Tuur Elzinga, who is the president of the union, could not be here tonight, and the organization asked me to open the seminar, and I'm very pleased to do that. So I will read the opening words Tuur wanted to say today, and I will also add a little personal note from myself at the end. So the words from Tuur, and I do very much agree with them, let it be clear. I'm very pleased to see so many different participants from different backgrounds, including from outside the Netherlands, like Belgium, Switzerland, and Peru. And a very special welcome to Ludovic Voet, Confederal Secretary at the ETUC. Ludovic, Tuur says hi. Good to see you. After years of international campaigning by domestic workers, trade unions, and other social organizations, on June the 16th, 2011, the ILO Convention 189 was finally adopted. And this convention is also known as the Domestic Workers Convention. This convention recognized domestic workers should have the same rights as any other worker, with access to social security, pension, and disability insurance. So the expectations were high. We hoped that the ratification process would start right away, and that the rights of all domestic workers, including migrants and undocumented migrants, would be brought an important step forward. Trade unions and domestic worker organizations initiated campaigns such as the 12 by 12 campaign, aiming for 12 ratifications in 2012. So after 10 years worldwide, the convention has now been ratified by 31 countries, but Fortunately, the Netherlands is still not yet one of them. And this means that domestic workers in the Netherlands are still considered as workers who do not need to receive full recognition of their labor rights. And this became painfully evident against last year during the COVID-19 pandemic, when thousands of domestic workers lost their jobs overnight. They had no job security and social security to fall back on. Many migrant domestic workers ended up on the street or felt obliged to leave the country. And let's see today how to get domestic workers' rights on the agenda again. We want to listen to experiences of people who have been in the forefront in those countries where C189 did get ratified, such as Belgium and Peru. And let's also analyze today what we have done in the Netherlands so far, because FNV and the Migrant Domestic Workers Union, together with many others, have done a very intensive lobby of having C189 ratified here as well. What can we learn from that process and how can we improve it? FNV believes in the importance of domestic workers' rights also for the trade union. And here I want to add a personal note as Renate Bos, as team leader from the cleaning sector. As said, due to the COVID pandemic, a lot of domestic workers lost their jobs. The organizing committee of FNV Migrant Domestic Workers took the initiative to ask the FNV to help to solve the acute financial needs of the migrant domestic workers and especially the undocumented migrant domestic workers. They had no social security at all to fall back and also felt obliged to support their families in countries that even had more problems. This was a very difficult process, and after many, many tries, we did not succeed. And part of the problem seemed to be that a part of the union members are not supportive against what they call illegal workers. And the FNV board, and I'm sure, and I know, not Tuur Elzinga himself, he was very important and supportive, but the board was not brave enough to go against this populist sentiment within the union. And also a lot of legal problems were raised. So in the end, we decided to set up a private foundation and worked with private fundraising to help where possible. Only FNV Cleaning, the sector, donated to this foundation. Now that the FNV has a new board with more progressive views and an important board member who worked with migrant workers himself, I have new hope that FNV will literally put its money where its mouth is, because the problems are still not solved. And I look forward to hear from other unions attending the seminar if they had the same experiences within their unions, and I hope to learn from them. So far, my personal note to Tuur's speech. 150,000 domestic workers at least work in the Netherlands. They do important and indispensable work. Hundreds of thousands of Dutch people give them the keys to their homes, the care of their children and the elderly. They are an indispensable economic factor. So since their economic and social added value is enormous, then why don't we make sure they have the same rights as any other worker in our country? Of course, we know that at the end, we need our politicians to act upon this issue. It is a pity that we could not really get any parliament member here tonight, even though we know that some political parties are positive about the need to ratify the convention and make sure our legislation recognizes the full rights of domestic workers. Still, I hope tonight we will have a fruitful and inspiring meeting, and that it will be the start of a lot of other actions to improve the conditions of our fellow trade unionists, the domestic workers. Thank you.
Thank you too, Renate. And it's a pity we don't have an applause button, because I would have clicked it. we can do it ourselves in front of the screen. Thank you for these welcoming words, and it was and this confirmation of the commitment of the FNV to the struggle of the domestic workers, and also for your personal note, was very heartwarming to hear, and your honesty also about the challenges in our own union of positioning ourselves in this discussion about also the legal status of many of the document the migrant domestic workers. And this is actually also a good bridge to our next speaker, Ludovic. I talked with him during the test session because I wasn't sure how to pronounce his first name, which I'm now sure it is Ludovic, but I'm still not actually sure about the last name, Ludovic. Is it because in Dutch you would say voet, but I'm not sure if that's also in your mother tongue the case. But in any case, welcome. You're of course representing the European Trade Union Confederation in this conversation, and where you work as Confederal Secretary in charge of the migration dossier. So this is actually a good connection with the discussion that that Renate raised, because I understood there are also some changes in the migration policies on the level of the ETUC regarding the position of the trade unions in Europe towards how to position themselves in the struggle for undocumented workers or migrant workers. So we would very much like to hear from you about this position of the ETUC. And also, of course, what that means for the translation into union practice for the affiliated unions to the ETUC, such as the FNV, because as FNV, obviously, we are one of the affiliates. So please, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Martin and Renate, and thanks to Tuur for the hi. I want to, you can pronounce voet, as I'm from Belgium. It's the same as in Dutch, so that's quite fine. So I want first of all also to congratulate FNV for the organization of this seminar, but also for the elections you had on Saturday for your executive board. So of course, congratulations to all the new members of the executive board. Also, as you mentioned at the beginning, I think we are in a hot day today. Also in Belgium, same case, 29 degrees I see here still at this hour. And I think it's important also to mention it because these are all also the working conditions in which domestic workers are working today. And so it's also something that is not easy and that will come, that will happen more and more with climate change, etc. So that's also something that we have to think about on an International Domestic Workers' Day. So yes, ETUC is clearly committed to support migrants' workers' rights, including those undocumented. And it's important for us that ETUC and all our members stay in the front line, defending equality for all workers. So it means also fighting different kind of discrimination, racism, discrimination, xenophobia, but also supporting also the migrant workers in their daily life, in the problems that they face at work, but also outside of work. ETUC advocate for an open Europe based on the values and principle of human rights, equal treatment, solidarity and inclusion. Unfortunately, this is not really the case at European level. We see that the Migration and Asylum Pact is not really a policy that is based on solidarity or on human rights defense. It's rather a policy that is a coordination of how we can better deport people that are entering illegally in the European Union, and on the other hand, providing some support to those who are already there, but that's not, of course, sufficient for us as a policy for the European Union. We believe that defending undocumented workers' rights is crucial to defend both their human rights and to ensure their labor rights are implemented as all workers deserve it. So a worker, undocumented or not, is a worker, and we have a crucial role at all levels to play to enforce these rights. So it means at European level, as we are trying to do with the ETUC, but also at national level, as you are doing, and at local level, at company level, and at sectoral level. So there's a wide range of action that we can do as trade unions to defend migrants and undocumented workers. I think that now more than ever, it's a key moment to reinforce our cooperation and to build the solidarity among workers in a moment when division is used also by reactionary forces to divide workers. It's important that trade unions really stay strong and to build this narrative and these concrete actions that unite workers in the workplace and outside of the workplace. We have seen that with the immense consequences of the COVID-19 crisis, but I think we didn't see everything yet. We know already that undocumented workers were one of the most vulnerable and marginalized workers communities in Europe. It was already the case before, but it was even more obvious. But it was also even more obvious how essential they were in this pandemic. But still they face, as it was mentioned by Renata, problems in accessing social protection. They have significant barriers to claim employment rights. As the law ties employment rights to immigration status, they face a lot of risk of deportation. At the same time, they often work in parts of the labor market where we as trade unions are less present or are trying to be present, but face also difficulties, not only because of the fact that a lot of undocumented workers works there, but also because of the precarious conditions in which they are, and that we know that in all areas of work where precarious work is predominant, it's also difficult for trade union to organize. It's difficult for workers then to access to collective bargaining and to improve their rights. And it applies to here a lot of essential sectors: construction, transport, tourism, agriculture, food industry, health and social care, domestic and care work, etc. We know that women make up a significant and majoritarian part of these sectors and are overrepresented in the unsecured jobs as well as in all the informal economy. Migrant workers are particularly also marked by discrimination, social inclusion, and lack of job opportunity, and are also as an additional layer exposed to abuse, violence, and harassment. So this is something also that we have to take in our trade union work. I think it's really important that there we also see what EU level initiative can also help in this regard. So of course there's the work that we have to do as unions to defend them at the workforce, but there are also EU initiatives like the one that we are pushing for on adequate minimum wage that can also put outside of poverty a lot of workers. So if the directive on minimum wage would be implemented in Europe, 24 million workers would go out of poverty from one day to another. So it means also a lot of undocumented workers, a lot of women workers. Also, the initiative we are pushing on pay transparency between women and men for the same work is also important and would also be an advance for initiative. It would really improve the working conditions. I think also, of course, about informal work, non-standard work. So there's, for example, an initiative that will come at the end of the year on platform work, but it's also important not to look only at platform work. We know that in platform work, there's a lot of undocumented workers, but they face the same problem as non-standard workers in general, like domestic workers are facing. And so the lack of access to collective bargaining, to good classification of work, of working conditions, of health and safety, and of social protection is a problem that they face, all of them. So that we will give this message to the European Commission. So for this, in trade union work, we need clearly to give more, to give also a space, I think, to undocumented workers and migrant workers, so that they can also discuss. It's not, it's about also their problems, and we know that workers have to raise their problems themselves. We cannot do this for them alone. We need to empower them in the union, and this means also giving them the space to develop their demands in the union. We can do, in doing this, a huge difference by advocating for their rights, helping them to file complaints, for example, and helping them not risking deportation, as well as I think that's a huge work to do at our level, at company level. It's to provide also these workers with information, advice, and support. And we know that this is difficult because of their precarious situation. A lot of our members are doing that. We are trying to gather the different experiences of our members in the Union Migrant network that we developed over the last few years. But we know also that some unions are developing spaces to organize migrant domestic workers. This is, for example, the case of my national union in Belgium, so CSC. And for example, the ratification of ILOC 189 is part of the demand, and also the question of the permanent regularization of the status of these workers is also a key question that they can raise. But a lot of other unions all over Europe are also working on this. So I would finish by saying that ETUC calls for opening at European level for more admission channels for labor migration for different skills and sectors, when we know that the Commission and the member states are more pushing to attract high-skilled workers, because of course they want to attract talent and not at whole level of skills. And this is something that we see, of course, as a problem in terms of course, politically, it's a brain drain approach with a third country, but also it's not taking the starting point of defending workers' rights as a starting point. So equal treatment, labor rights, equal social and family rights as the national workers is also important to raise. We need also a sustainable domestic and care work model in Europe, and for this, it is also necessary to sustain social protection systems and facilitate equal participation in the labor market and work-life balance for families. And this last point on having a sustainable domestic and care work model is also important to take into account from a economic point of view, to have a look at, is it sustainable to employ people in such bad working conditions? We have to change the business model that is behind exploitation of workers. And this is something that also trade union can raise at national level by organizing also the undocumented migrants. Thank you, and have a good webinar.
Well, thank you too. Very informative and great to hear the stance of the ETUC on this. And I think also as FNV, we have some work to do in translating this policy into our practice. I want to see at this moment if there are any questions.
Yes, there is one question from Richard.
Okay.
It's in the Q&A, and it's about would the ETUC support the EU directive for a European EU social security number? This would help national unions and social services to fight abuse, but on the other hand, could also put undocumented workers in a difficult position if it is not protected that every worker should have access to things like medical treatment, bank accounts, social security. Is the question clear?
Because this is not my topic, but I will check directly, because I know that we work on it, and I will answer in the chat directly.
Okay, so the answer will come in the chat. Thank you. more questions are not there, Martin.
Okay, well, maybe we can go then for a reaction by Tesseltje. Tesseltje de Lange, we invited her specifically also for tonight, is a professor European migration law at the Radboud University in Rotterdam.
Nijmegen?
Sorry, Nijmegen. Oh God, wrong city. I'm from Amsterdam, so yeah. We seem to think this is the center of the world. We should
Say no more.
work on our geography. Okay, so I also heard from reliable sources you're very committed also to the struggle of the migrant domestic workers, and I think maybe in the context of this discussion about the legal status. From the perspective of like legal frameworks in Europe, what do you see as options for unions, and maybe also taking into account the general framework that Ludovic just explained to us from the European level?
Yeah. I will be brief, but one is thank you very much for the invitation. Two is I cannot say how happy I am with the resolution that Ludovic just discussed with us, presented to us. I think it is a very enriching, strong document with very clear statements on something that needs to be done already for a long time. And the fact that this topic has not been addressed in politics, either in the Netherlands or at the EU level, I think a couple of weeks ago, we had a session in the Pakhuis de Zwijger. I do come in Amsterdam sometimes. And I said it is a form of regulatory neglect not to address this topic. So I'm really happy that that the Trade Union Federation is taking it on. If you and I agree also that if you look at what Europe is planning, because there's big plans to change a lot. The demographics in Europe really call for more labor migration. The vacancies are too many to fill, and you're right. It's mainly focused on skilled, medium skilled, high skilled, and highly qualified people. But I like to see the word talent. You said, they only want talent. But I like to see talent so much wider. You are all talented, listening in. We all have different talents, and you might have an education for it, yes or no. But forget about education and merit and diplomas. I think we all have talent. And I think that makes you such a strong group across Europe. Because your talent is to make other people be able to do their job, to develop their talent. So it is a kind of support that you deliver that is crucial. I always wonder what would happen if you would go on strike. Now, of course, you went on strike, but then forced during the COVID lockdown. So I'm really curious to learn what else will come out of that, and that is actually something that at Radboud University we are studying. So if you have ideas, do reach out to discuss what that period of forced inactivity taught us. Looking at the so what is Europe? Your question. Sorry, Martin, I had to get this off my chest. So I like the idea about, let's say I like the campaign right now running from the European Labour Authority on seasonal work. I don't know from the top, but it's something like work is seasonable, rights are not. I love it. We need that for domestic workers. We need that for undocumented, even outside the domestic setting. We need that kind of power to come with rights and a status, because the easiest way to get to those rights is to have a residence permit. I mean, I love all the ideas of city passports, of social security numbers, of whatever, but a residence permit really gives access so much easier, because then you fall within the scope of what is called a single permit directive and equal rights. And that is what it does. It gives equal rights. So I think we should get in there. Now, there's ideas to put ICT in the computer technology, and I mean we've been doing computer technology for 30 years, and we don't have enough people to do it. So we keep having labor migrants in that sector, like we keep having labor migrants in this sector. So there's parallels there. But like Ludovic was very right to say, politically, economically, this is a really tight spot. And I think only grouping together, working together on this across Europe, regularizations elsewhere in Europe can push the agenda here, that people see, maybe we should do something similar, to not be the country with the worst labor market position for such a crucial group of workers. I think it takes time, but I do think you have momentum, and I think the resolution is a really strong start of what I hope would give you more rights than currently there. Yeah, I hope that. Yeah, and yeah, I don't. It's not like I don't have a roadmap. You know, go here, go there, and then this, and then that. It's politics, and as an academic, I can see what's out there. I can see what's happening. I can share that information with you and keep sharing it, so that maybe politicians who are reading my stuff also become aware that there's something happening. Maybe we should do something too. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, and thank you for sharing that with us in this webinar also, as part of the roadmap. It's not the complete roadmap, but it gives some perspectives. So I guess that's also why we're here together, to share different perspectives and also different experiences of struggle for the rights of domestic workers. And actually, I want to continue with exactly that, because we have been now focusing on the European level, very necessary, as you also confirmed, Tesseltje. But of course, also part of the struggle has been going on in the localities, different countries around the world. And among them, obviously, the Netherlands, even though the convention is not yet ratified, there has, of course, been a lot of activities going on, also organized by the migrant domestic workers themselves. And with that, I want to give the word actually to Joy Escaño, who is part of the migrant domestic workers network of the FNV, who will give actually an overview of what you have been doing, right, Joy, with the network. And you also wanted to show a video before your intervention, if I'm not mistaken. Right?
Yeah, we prepared some video from the history and the struggles of migrant domestic workers for 10 years. Yeah.
It's been our work to make a home for you. Now hear our words we hold as true. This world is home to all of us. Unlock your heart to respect and trust. It's been our work to make a home for you. Now hear our words we hold as true. This world is home to all of us. Unlock your hearts to respect and trust. now work to make a home for you. Now hear our words we hold as true. This world is home to all of us. Unlock your hearts to respect and trust. It's been our work to make a home for you. Now hear our words we hold as true. This world is home to all of us. Unlock your hearts to respect and trust. One last time. It's been our work to make a home for you. Now hear our words we hold as true. This world is home to all of us. Unlock your heart to respect and trust.
We are the domestic workers in the Netherlands. In solidarity to support all the domestic workers in the whole world.
Together we strong.
So
Great,
we-
Joy.
yeah,
Thanks
we
for that
want to make-
video. You made it yourself, which actually shows your.
with some friends, of course, with the help of the team. It's the FNB Migrant Domestic Workers team. It's a group effort.
Mhm.
Actually.
Yes,
Yeah.
great.
Before I have my formal prepared speech, I'd like to say that I was so inspired with the speakers, with the three speakers. It gives me the motivations to go on. And I'm really glad that there are people who are willing to support us in our struggle. And I representing the migrants, domestic workers, so I hope I can give justice and respect that they deserve. Yeah. And my name is not really Joy, but because of being undocumented, I wanted to be invisible. But my real name is Melanie. So that's part of the fears of being undocumented. You want to be invisible. Yeah. But then today, allow me to join you all in celebrating the 10th year anniversary of the adaptations of Convention 189. But let me start by saying that domestic work is something that we should regard as vital and important in every society. By this work, many people become content and happy. Based on my personal account as domestic workers myself for many years now, I know that many Dutch families are happy to have their houses regularly cleaned, to have their children and elderly being taken care of, to have their food cooked and ready on their dining tables, their gardens bloom with flowers during summer, their clothes washed and wear ironed before going to work, their dogs being walked regularly, and their houses guarded every time they are on vacation. Yes, the Dutch families are happy that there are people who actually do all this work for them. People who make it easier for them to pursue their careers, to earn money for their families and loved ones. These families are happy with those people who they call domestic workers, who are mostly migrants and women from poor countries. People who have in the Netherlands armed with a simple dream to work in search for a better life. Ladies and gentlemen, One of them is now speaking to you. I traveled 1,000 miles from the Philippines with a dream of my family. I arrived in this country many years ago without any idea what my future will hold. For me, what mattered that time was to get a job so I could support my family in the Philippines. Sad to say that my first job was not a nice experience. It was in 2006. I worked for one household as a full-time live-in domestic worker. Every day, I would clean the house and the small grocery shop owned by the family in The Hague, earning only 300 euros a month. I almost worked 16 hours a day, from Monday to Saturday, without quitting contract, without overtime pay, holiday pay, rest day, without insurance, and without a personal space to sleep. After a few months, I lost weight due to long hours of work and lack of enough sleep every night. So I left the job to find new employers in another city for fear of being reported to the authorities. While it is true that my employers are now much better than the first one, the fact remains I am still vulnerable to exploitations as a worker because of my regular status. I know that my experience was just only one of the many deplorable stories concerning migrant domestic workers in this country. In this regard, let me raise this question. Does the Dutch labor policy already provide adequate protection to our workers? Today, 10 years ago, on the adaptations of Convention 189, the representative of the Netherlands who spoke in Geneva about our country's position said, and I quote, that ratification of this convention will be very difficult for our country as the text, in our view, does not provide us with sufficient flexibility to maintain policies that, in our view, already provide an adequate level of protection to domestic workers, in particular regarding social security. Friends, during the 10 years which passed, we saw a growing understanding that there is not an adequate level of protection to domestic workers and in particular regarding social security. The regeling this Verlenian house does not provide decent social security as such. Though for so many people in this country, this work is a full-time job, be it at several households. And we, as migrant domestic workers, are in particular not protected in this system against abuses, against sudden loss of jobs, or ignorance of employers in case sickness or accidents. We saw the devastating results of the corona crisis when so many of our friends lost their job from one day to another because the employer did not need us anymore. No work, no income, not being able to pay our rent or support our families. I would say that these are a proof of inequality in the labor sector. This is a deliberate act of social injustice by the government that has flaunted its labor by telling to the world that it provides adequate protections to domestic workers. And when this is social injustice, then we need to do something. We should together demand the government to rectify this structural labor inequality by abolishing the home service scheme and at the same time by ratifying the ILO Convention 189. But you will understand our position. Ratifying C189 is not enough when it is not accompanied by additional legislation that allow undocumented migrants to work legally in the Netherlands. The process for decent labor conditions in domestic work, as mentioned by the Social Economic Council and others, are that more Dutch inhabitants would want to do this work. So more unemployed would get work again, and extra cost for the government to pay Social Security would be saved from unemployment benefits. As such, the migrant domestic workers would, without additional measures, not only be excluded from the benefits, they can even be displaced from the sector. Also, recently, Bureau Clara Wichmann concluded about our position. Formalization of the market for personal service through deductions will lead to a substitution from black to white work, which will make it more difficult for undocumented people to operate in this market. You will understand, if agree fully with the remarks following, that in order to prevent increasing vulnerability of this group, the abolition of the home service scheme and the introductions of tax deductions or vouchers will have to be accompanied by additional policy regarding the possibilities of undocumented people to work in the Netherlands. We are no disposable tools to be used. We're thrown away regarding the needs or possibilities in this country. Or would it mean when the work is becoming decent, there is no place for us anymore? We strive to work with dignity and rights, regardless of our migration status and for protection against abuse. This is what we want from the Dutch society and government. Respect for and recognitions of our presence and of our contributions to this society. And recognitions of our full rights, not only as worker, but also as a human being. We are realistic. We came from far, and we know there's still a long way to go. We invite our allies to go this way together with us and join our goals. We invite the FNB and other labor unions to develop new ways of organizing and to form strong alliances within society, to work together as workers, as women, and as migrants. My friends, as you all know, that our struggle for recognition is just, righteous, and noble. I tell you with sincerity, I have a strong faith that out of this struggle comes our fairest victory. Thank you so much.
Thank you to Joy. And thanks for giving a human face also to your struggle, to your needs, and also thank you for the perspectives given also for how to carry this struggle on. Not only the ratification, but also extra measures need to be in place. We will have some examples of what those additional measures can be in after the break, but it also it leaves us also a bit with the question how to go about that from the perspective of the FNV. And Jessica, you work as a policy advisor for the FNV specifically on this dossier. So that might also be a question for you, right? How does these recommendations translate into policies for the FNV? How do you see the future of this topic being translated into union policies for FNV?
Well, I'm first of all, thank you for inviting me to speak here, and thank you, Joy, for your courage to speak here today. I think I will start a bit with what we have done for the last 10 years on getting this ILO convention ratified. But to give a bit of a picture on the future, I do think I do see some light points that we can have this convention ratified. But we will need to keep on struggling, I think. And we need the domestic workers, the migrant domestic workers, to give the personal story of this issue. And I think we really need to have it ratified, the ILO convention. And we're not asking for a lot. We're asking for some basic, some very fundamental rights for domestic workers. We're asking for a minimum wage. We're asking for an 8-hour working day. And we're not asking for big cars or 9 million euros to, such as other people in the Netherlands are asking for. We are asking for something that is very fundamental. And domestic work is a normal form of work, and it enables other workers to work, to go about their business, and it's very essential to how we live our lives in the Netherlands and everywhere around the world. So this today, the ILO has issued a report on the anniversary, the 10-year anniversary of the ILO convention. And in this report, ILO wrote about the situation in the Netherlands. And they wrote about the regeling dienstverlening aan huis, the home services scheme. Joy mentioned that as well. And what the ILO said that was, because of this legal exception, 95% of domestic workers do not have access to social security in the Netherlands. 95%. And I know this, but still I was kind of shocked to read it in an official ILO report. So I think we have a lot of work to do. So what have we done as FNV for the last 10 years? And I'm talking about what we have done in the lobbying and research and such on. We have lobbied the government and the Dutch parliament intensively. We wrote a report. I'm not sure if I can show it with the screen at the back. Well, I'll send it afterwards. I'll post the link. But we wrote a report on how we can ratify ILO Convention 189 in the Netherlands. We have done research on the situation in Belgium. We will hear about that later on. How much it would cost, but also how much Dutch society would gain if we ratified it. Because it's not only costs, but we also gain something. One of the beautiful things I hear one of the migrant domestic workers say that they really want to pay taxes, for example. So what we have done, we have researched alternatives. We have given them to the Commissie Kalsbeek, the commission that was instated by the Dutch government to research how the ILO convention could be ratified. But that didn't really work very well because it didn't lead to any improvement for the domestic workers. We have worked together with the employer organizations in the cleaning industry. We published a vision document on how we could ratify ILO 189. And what we have also done, and Joy mentioned that as well, is we have worked in the SER, the Social Economic Council, on a report on how we could formalize domestic work in the Netherlands. And we advised the government, together with employer organizations, that the government should research how to formalize domestic work. And with formalizing, we mean that domestic work should be decent work regarding the ILO principles. So access to minimum wage, social security, protection. But the Dutch government has responded to this report. Minister Koolmees has responded to it, but he said that it would be up to a next government to make any statements on how they would ratify it. So that is a pity, but it also gives us an opportunity because the next government has to say something about the Social Economic Council report and how they are planning to formalize domestic work. So I think we need to make sure, and I hope this evening can be a new starting point for that, that we can get it back on the agenda, that the forming parties are incorporating this in their plans for the next 4 years. And I think we really need to make sure that that happens. And lastly, which is a bit of an unexpected one, but we had Ludovic here before, but there's also the European Work-Life Balance Directive. And what this European directive does is that it gives all workers the right to paid parental leave and paid paternity leave. And by saying all workers, the Dutch government has to make parental leave and paternity leave available to all workers, including domestic workers. So now at the UWV, the Social Security organization for the Netherlands, are making an infrastructure to give domestic workers the right to paid parental leave and paid paternity leave. So of course, we are saying, if you have to put up a structure, if you are making some sort of system to give domestic workers entitlement to paid paternity and paid parental leave, take it one step further, please, and give them the access to full Social Security. So the struggle continues. And thank you for our migrant domestic workers for sticking with us for the last 10 years.
Thank you, Jessica, for adding this perspective from the policy department and from the more lobby perspective and opportunities that you see at the moment for that. Indeed, let's take this moment to strategize on it and create a new momentum, as was already said before by Tesseltje. We are a bit behind schedule, so I'm not going to say a lot about it. There are also some questions posed, but in the chat. But I also see they were already answered by the panelists themselves. So maybe we can leave it at that for the moment.
There is, sorry, Martin, there is one question from Maitet, which I think we can answer at the end. At the end of the whole session. I think it would be appropriate to do that.
Okay, that's great.
So Maitet, hang on. We will come back to you at the end.
Hang on. Okay, thank you, Charlie. So we're a bit behind schedule. We were supposed to have a 5-minute break. I think it would be good to still have a 2-minute break at least, to have at least the possibility to move a bit and to get some fresh air. Is that okay with you, Rebecca, who will take the responsibility of a program after the break? Yes? What do you say? 2? Okay. So we'll take a 2-minute break. We will have Joy back again at the end of the program. And after the break, we will especially focus on best practices, because the Netherlands didn't ratify the convention yet, but there were different countries that did. And our main focus will be, after the break, what can we learn from those experiences? See you in 2 minutes.
So welcome everyone again. It's great to see all the solidarity with the domestic workers, all of you interested in coming to have this evening with us. Tonight, we have 3 participants who comes to share with us their experience. We have Grace Papa from the ACB trade union in Belgium. We have Marcolina Infante from the Centraal trade union in Peru. And we have Mirela Falco from the SIV trade union in Switzerland. So welcome to all of you. I have a series of questions that I would like to share with you. They are around 7, so it will be a fast Q&A with all of you. Perhaps we can start by having the first question, which is a condensed question to share. Is about perhaps you can introduce yourself, which is your trade union as well, and you can tell us why was the convention 189 of importance for your trade union and for your members? Why the convention 189? Why to put effort into it? So perhaps we could start with Grace, then Mirela, and then Marcolina. So Grace, you have the word.
Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you for having me. I am very happy to have this webinar, to be present and to talk to you and to share experiences, of course. I am Grace Papa. I work for ACV Food and Services since 2011. I have been organizing domestic workers since then. I am also a member of the negotiating council on a federal level. And I am also an executive member of the International Domestic Workers Federation. As of September, I will change my job because I'm sure you know that, but EFAT has included the sector of the domestic workers within the federation, the European Federation, and I had the chance to be appointed as the political secretary for the sector. So I am very, very happy about that, and I will work closely with Malu Villanueva, that has been elected as vice chair. So this was about the introduction, but if it's possible, I'm going to use the translation because it has been a very long day full of interviews and it was hectic. So I'm going to enjoy the translation to answer the questions. Donc, pourquoi est-ce que notre organisation syndicale
why has our syndicate ratified this convention in Belgium? Well, this was very important because in Belgium, as you know, since 2004, we've had a system which employs domestic workers, principally cleaners at home who work in private homes, and it's a sector which includes about 140,000 workers in Belgium. And in Belgium since 2014 and much before the adoption of the convention in Geneva, we'd already invested in a sector which formalizes and professionalizes domestic workers. However, it was still important to ratify the convention because this sector only involves a group of domestic workers, and those are the people who clean in homes. But as we said before, this doesn't include irregular domestic workers without papers. And so naturally, the convention can help us in the struggle to regularize these workers.
Right. So indeed, the convention is not only important for the labor rights side of it, but it's also important for the regularization and of the migration status of those workers who are performing the domestic work. Thank you, Grace. Mirela, can you tell us a little bit of who you are and why is the Convention 189 important for your trade union?
Alors, merci beaucoup pour l'invitation. Je vais être.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Can you hear me? Yeah. Yep. Yep. So I've been working at the trade union for about 10 years. And for the past 2 years, I've been responsible for domestic workers, and so I've heard a lot of stories. And thank you so much, Joy, for your incredibly rich and important testimony. So that's what I wanted to say. And in terms of the ratification of 189, for us in Switzerland, it's very important for us to have international texts on which we can rest, because domestic workers are not included in the different regulations. So there's really no oversight. And so the convention was ratified 6 years ago, and there's still problems. So, do not think that the ratification of C-189 solves everything. And one of the problems is controls and oversight, because if you don't have oversight and controls, you have texts that are not, checked. So to have a text, of course, it's important. It helps you to push for changes at the legal level, and it helps us also. Switzerland is a country that is closing itself to migration, even though the huge needs, the population is aging. There are not enough uh, spaces for kindergarten. But these international conventions are something that you can lean on to call for equality of treatment and also gender equality, because as you already said, 80 or more percent of these workers are women. So there's a gender discrimination that is at work here too. And C-189 specifically says that there should not be gender discrimination. So these texts are very important for us to lean on. But then, in addition to the checks and the oversight, you also need to inform people so that they know what are the conditions that they need to regularize this situation. It's very complex, and the whole situation is becoming harder. I have people tell me, look, I don't have any choice. But you really need to inform people so that they can, they can overcome the fear. And 60 hours a week is just too much, and it's not normal. It should be forbidden by the law. That's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Mireya. So for what I understand is like regularization is important for the labor rights, for the migration aspect, but also to bring forward people who are right now living in the shadows, basically, and who do not have access to the social system in general. So regularization indeed is a necessary part of the process. So Marcolina, maybe you can tell us a little bit of what it meant for the domestic workers in the Centraal, the Convention 189, and how is it in your trade union?
Sí, muy buenas noches para ustedes.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Marcolina Infante. I'm a domestic workers, and I'm a trade union leader of the Centraal. We exist since 2009. Thank you very much for this invitation. The convention was adopted 10 years ago, and the process has been very important for us. Why? After the we wanted to, our goal was to get a convention, and we wanted to ratify it because it would be a legal framework for rights of domestic workers. And it was a basis to develop a new law against discrimination. This new law gives us equal rights. So this convention helped us to establish rights, and it helped us to elaborate this new law. A new law with equal rights for domestic workers. The old law was discriminated. So therefore, the ratification of the convention has been very important, and afterwards develop a new law. So therefore, this convention has been very important for us.
Thank you, Marcolina, and for sharing that, how important it is. I am also very curious about how the three of you included your allies, your supporters, because there are the struggle of the domestic workers themselves, but we reach our goals always together with allies. So who were those allies in your campaign, in your struggle, and how did you incorporate them? What role did you give them in your campaign, if there were any allies? Perhaps Grace, we can start with you. Will you tell us a little bit about who you work with your allies?
Oui, alors pour être vraiment tout à fait honnête,
Now, to be perfectly honest, when C-189 was adopted, the government was already favorable to adopting the convention, even though it took a few years to ratify it. But the political will was there. And there was a system that already declared domestic help. So we didn't really need to really double up in terms of finding allies, etc. But naturally, in Belgium, we have social partners. We're very strong. And we have a strong social dialogue, and we really work very hard with other trade unions. That was very important, even though we don't always have the same political points of view. But we all realized that for domestic workers, it was important to work together because these are, as we've said, vulnerable persons, isolated, majority women. And so, there's a real need there so we work together with other trade unions. And so we're allies in the sector, and this is still the case. But in addition to the trade unions, there are also the migrant platforms. We work with Fair Work Belgium. It's a platform for migrant workers, undocumented migrant workers. They're not really affiliated, but they're well represented, and they were an important ally in our struggle. Also, employers. Employers are our allies in this struggle. For the negotiations and the ratification. And naturally, of course, workers, our first allies, whenever there were actions that needed to carry it out, they were there, to go out and show their faces and put the pressure on politicians to get it ratified.
Great. So we can say that certainly aligning with other trade unions was a strategy for you, aligning together with CSIs in the political moment that was support at that moment, and you CSIs that support, and but also your work together with the NGOs was important. So those could be strategies that we can also use here in the Netherlands. So Mirella, could you tell us a little bit about your allies and how do you make use of them in your campaign?
Alors, je vais compléter ce que vient de dire Grace.
Okay, well, I'm going to add to what Grace just said. We have experts who are economical experts. So they're important allies that you have to take into account because before the adoption ratification, there were a whole bunch of economic reports that prove the economic interest of domestic workers and the economic interest of regularizing them and integrating them in the social security system. So it's true that all of these statistics prove the added value of regularizing these employees. So these are, what should I say, technical experts. And then there are all the allies. A whole bunch of platforms and like Caritas and different Protestant action groups and the population also, because when the ratification was imminent, people started signing petitions and stuff. So, of course, your best ally are numbers, visible numbers. And there are assemblies in Geneva. There were more than 2,000 people who came together.
So,
it started in 2001 and then it finally got done in 2015. So, it took a number of years,
So we can, in the case of Switzerland, we can say that yes, CSI is in the political moment, but also making use of statistical data, making use of all sort of economic reports. I can say, I can even stretch that to even academic work, really important here. But also, I heard that you mentioned Caritas. Caritas is an organization that is church related, if I am not, if I'm correct. And I see it also that we can find allies beyond the labor movement, that we can find allies in society as well. So what you are telling us, Mirela, in your experience, is that we should stretch our look for beyond the labor movement and include the domestic workers as a society issue. And we should include all the other society members and make it as more broader in our message as possible. Yes? Great. Thank you, Mirela. So, Marcolina, could you tell us a little bit about your allies and how do you include them in your struggle?
Sure. The allies had a very important role in the ratification of the convention in Peru. To start with, the trade union centers helped us with the legal parts. And in the representation, and the ILO helped us technically. We also got support from left-wing MPs. They supported us, and feminist groups, NGOs, all the colleagues that participated in our struggle, in our campaigns, in the demonstrations, in the meetings that we organized with the trade union centers. All the federations, the trade union federations participated. So they helped us to empower us, to inform us about the law. We had to, all those organizations were allies, also the Ministry of Justice, the Ombudsman, the Ministry of Women, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. They helped us to position our sector because the approval had to come from the Ministry of Labor. They said that they didn't understand the convention and that somebody of the ILO had to come to explain it to them. So our allies helped us to convince the Ministry of Labor to ratify the convention. So the ILO had to explain them why it was important to ratify this convention. They convinced the Ministry of Labor to ratify it. So this was also an important ally. For us, it was a very important law. The ratification of the convention was important because it created a new political framework for domestic workers. There was also a lot of resistance, especially from the employers. So it wasn't easy. They didn't want it. They said that we didn't contribute much to the economy of the country, and that we were second-class workers. So it has been very difficult. But we have found many allies, and we didn't have a lot of experience. But the domestic workers participated as well. So this was also very important.
Wow, very interesting, Marcolina. I finding out also about the resistance of the employers, because indeed we do have allies, but we have a lot of resistance also to give to providing rights to the domestic workers. And there has to be also a message to counteract that resistance. Also, I found very, very interesting when you say we actually went directly to the ministers of financial affairs. We went to the ministers that can actually give the yes or no to change this law. So there have been a tactic that we have seen from Mirela and Grace have shared with us about talking with politicians as well, but going directly to where to the decision maker as higher as we can, and look for representation and a space in the table is a very important part also of the struggle. That's a great tactic. Thank you, Marcolina, for sharing with us. And I will say for the participants for a last question, a last round of questions, could you tell us a little bit about how was the role of the domestic workers themselves, of your members, in the campaigning process? Perhaps they were involved in sharing flyers, sharing a petition, or sharing giving a speech of like what was the role of those members and how they were activated. But also, if you could share one strategic advice to the domestic workers in the Netherlands, what will that be? What will be your and in that point, you will be talking directly to the campaign of the domestic workers here. What is your strategic advice? Perhaps we can start with Grace.
Il y a tellement de choses à dire parce que les travailleuses
There is so much to be said because really domestic workers are really the whole strength of our whole sector. Often people say that this group is not organized, etc. But let me tell you, it's very possible to organize, and this super solidary. And they really believe in trade union work. Let me tell you something. We had set up a little group of domestic workers because the European Parliament had invited us to talk about the regularization. It was a campaign about clean toilets or something, and we had hung up stickers in all the toilets of the European Parliament, and we were able to go into the plenary, and all the politicians were there. And well, we hadn't prepared this, but a domestic worker asked a question to the assembly, and she said, "Would you be capable of raising your hand? Or rather, if you didn't have domestic workers, if you don't have any domestic workers, please raise your hand." Well, that was impressive because there was a total silence in the room. Everybody was super embarrassed because the domestic workers everywhere with these diplomats, etc., without papers, irregulars, etc. So this was a really essential question, a very ironic. then of course we organize all kinds of actions, strikes, and huge actions, because, as I say, really there's so much strength amongst domestic workers, that's for sure. But yeah, I don't really have a particular advice to give to FNV, because really I think domestic workers know better than I do what to do in the Netherlands. But a general advice that I would give to all countries, in order to succeed in the ratification of C189, you need 3 elements. 1, political will. If the political will is not there, it's going to be very difficult. And when you talk about political will, we talked about it before, but and maybe also investment, because for certain tasks, so domestic workers, these are maybe tasks that need support, public support, financial public support. Number 2, we have to work on yourselves as a trade union organization to be strong and inclusive, because a lot of trade unions do not put domestic workers, at the heart of their work. So domestic workers have to push within our own organizations to force them to be inclusive and to really make a priority of this work. 3rd element, work on the social dialogue. Work on the social dialogue with the interested parties. You have to create unions, create agreements to ratify this convention. Thank you.
Thank you, Grace. Those are like very clear advice, and I will take from it: do not run a passive campaign, run an active campaign. And even if you have to go to the toilet and put your campaign sticker there so everybody to see it, do it. So great advice. Thank you, Grace. Mirela and Marcolina, can you tell us in a short way what role do your members took on in the campaign and strategic advice for us? Mirela.
Alors, ce qui s'est passé à Genève, c'est les permanences gratuites.
What happened in Geneva is that we started to organize free meetings to explain to people without papers what were their rights. Because all this work started 2001, 2004, and at this time, if you had no papers, if you were undocumented, people, came and picked you up and they took you at the border. This is what we really saw in those years. So the whole work of the social dialogue, the political work, is that we were going to create files and make sure that if people were to be checked by the police, that they wouldn't appear as bad terrorists or people who need to be expulsed at 6 a.m. No, these are women who are working as domestic workers, and we have a file on them and we can protect them. So create files to protect them. And with this protection, we were able then to go and protest in Bern, our federal capital, and this was a massive protest. And, at this point, they believed us, and it made it possible for us to visibilize these people.
So for what I hear from Mirela, using your trade union as a way of entrance of society, as a way of, as an undocumented person, also to say, no, I am an active member of my trade union, therefore I am, I am part of society. I am part of, and I do have like a trade union members here have also a trade union card, and that is a part in which we can use as an undocumented worker to say, no, I am part of this society. So great, thank you, Mirela. Marcolina, could you tell us a little bit shortly some strategic advice for the domestic workers?
Sí, bueno, no sé, pero nosotros creo que nos ha ligado muchas cosas así de suerte porque las hemos luchado, ¿no? Pero
I would like to mention some organizations. One organization which has been very important for us is the International Federation of Domestic Workers. They helped us a lot. And we were able to use the political momentum in Peru. We in 2018 there were many political problems in Peru. We always have political problems in Peru. The same is happening right now. And the same happened in 2018. And Parliament passed many bills. So we used that moment. And they said they used the political problems to support us. So it is important to use the political momentum. And the domestic workers, they know what the convention is about. That is important. They should know what it is about, and they wouldn't support us if they didn't know what it was about. It is very important for the Dutch workers to unite and to become a member of trade union and look for allies in other organizations, in other trade unions. I'm sure that FNV supports them, and I'm sure that there are other trade unions that would support their struggle. And I would recommend that they not only meet with the part of the government that supports them, but also with the people in the government who don't support them. That is what we did. We also went to ministers and ministries that didn't support us. So we used the spaces that existed actively. And so I don't know how politics function in the Netherlands, but we use the political momentum in Peru. And we did that by passing or helping to pass a bill that helped domestic workers. The pandemic has been very difficult for us, of course, but the allies have been very important also in passing the bill. We wouldn't have been able to do this on our own. And it's also important to insist and to keep insisting. Thank you very much, Rebecca.
The advice from Marcolina that I am hearing is to not only talk with your allies, also make a good mapping and a strategy for those who don't support you yet, because maybe you will find new support in there. But that also what I hear from you, Marcolina, is that the Convention 189 can be used as an organizing tool. When we inform our potential members, our potential allies about what the convention is about, we can use it to mobilize them too. And that is a great advice that I am hearing from you, Marcolina. I would like that our next guests and speakers also reflect on this advice because I would like to know how this advice could influence our strategy here in the Netherlands. Thank you very much, Grace, Marcolina, and Mirella for these exchanges. Have been great. We also have other guests today. Hello, thank you. We also have other guests tonight who are Franny before I go into them, we also have other guests from the NGO sector, and they will be talking with us about how they will, how could they support the domestic workers and how they see their role in that process. But before we go there, I would like to, if maybe Joy could tell us something a little bit about, and Renata, if you could both tell us a little bit about those advice that you hear today and those ideas that you heard from our colleagues in Switzerland, Peru, and Geneva. How do you think that those ideas could influence your campaign here in the Netherlands, your long-term and short-term strategy here in the Netherlands? Perhaps we can start with Joy or Renata. Who would like to take the voice? Joyce?
Before, thank you so much to all the speakers, and also to the Migrant Domestic Workers Union. That's also what I noticed. We all have the same problem. In the political side, it is really hard to fight for because it's not only the ratifications that should be ratified, but also we have the legislations. And for a start, we have been working for this together with Rebecca for 10 years now. We've done a lot. We do mapping with all allies, left or right allies. We went to the parliament. We make noise. And we also have this very big demonstration supported by FNB, the cleaners sector. And also, as of now, we do also have some plans, especially we are because before, as I remember, when we have the Carlsbad Commission, says that the decisions was to not ratify the C189. It demoralized the domestic workers. But the importance of the FNB behind us, the allies behind us, who really told us to keep on going, to fight for what's right for us, for the right, the respect that we deserve. That's why I even say it's important to have the allies and also the domestic workers itself. We are collaborating with different domestic workers union, different allies. So, and we do have plans. Actually, we are right now in the process of having employers union or employers group to back us up during this fight, because it's very important that also the employers itself will speak how important our work is. So I think that's some part of the strategies that we're doing. And I'm really, really on behalf of migrant domestic workers, I'm really grateful that trade union, they never leave us. I mean, they are our strong supporters.
So it has been a long struggle, but you are looking forward to continue for it. And the domestic workers, like we say in the Netherlands, wij gaan door. We will continue with the struggle. Renata, tell us a little bit your perspective from the sector.
Yes, I will. But first, Rebecca, can I thank Joy for her speech she made at the beginning of this meeting? We talk about vulnerable migrant domestic workers, but if this is a vulnerable person speaking, I would like to hear you when you're feeling really strong and you have all the rights you earn to have. This was a fantastic speech. So thank you very much. Yes. I agree with you on the partners, and I also heard in the last about 2 hours maybe some other points of views or some other points of attack that we maybe can use. For instance, Ludovic told us something about platform work, and as FNV we are very involved in platform work, but we're not making the connection with migrant workers there. So maybe that's another point of attack. Maybe women's rights, because it's not only a domestic workers problem, it's also a problem about sexism and racism. And maybe we should use more groups and partners in our society to help us in the struggle. I also heard Jessica about the light points, and I think those are very important. And I wanted to thank the colleagues from Belgium and from Switzerland and Peru for their suggestions. And very much, Marcolina, meet with the people that don't support you, because Grace said there has to be political will, but at this moment there's no political will in the Netherlands. So we have to create this, and maybe I think it's sharp. We have to talk not with the allies in the politics, but with our enemies, so to say, and use the other thing I heard: facts. Use scientific, economic facts about the contribution domestic workers make to our society. And then maybe at the end, if nothing does work, if we have made a plan together with our organizing committee of migrant domestic workers to build this again and to make it stronger, and if nothing else works, we can maybe do this scientific experiment with Tesselcheck. What happens if we all go on strike? What happens in this country if domestic workers stop working until this convention has been ratified? So maybe that's our last step that we have to take. So lots of inspiration for us, I think, and I look forward to speak about this with our organizing committee of domestic workers. Thank you.
Thank you for this reflection. We have kind of privileged the voices of the domestic workers in the second part of the webinar, but we are very much eager to hear from our allies. And today we have Franny Parent, project coordinator from the Fair Work organization Fair Work. We also have Sarah with us today. She's coming from the Clara Bigman Stichting. She's from a lawyer from the organization, and we also have the representative from La Estrada today with us, Susan Hoff. Susan, Franny, and Sarah, welcome. Welcome to the webinar. Could you tell us a little bit about how do you see your role as an ally for the domestic workers in their struggle, and how do you see a future collaboration with the trade union? Perhaps we can start with Franny, and then with Sarah, and then with Susan.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for the invitation. It's an honor to join you at this event on the International Domestic Workers Day. Well, Fair Work as Fair Work, we support people facing severe forms of labor exploitation in claiming their rights and filing complaints. And a group we often see are domestic workers, and especially last year due to the COVID crisis, there was a big increase of numbers of people seeking help. And based on what we encounter in practice, we lobby for a structural solution for domestic workers to effectively access labor rights and protection and justice. So that's why the struggle for ratification of the ILO Convention 189 is very important to us. And we could collaborate on joint advocacy actions or statements. Today, for example, on the International Domestic Workers Day, we sent out a statement to Dutch politicians to push for the ratification of the convention and also adequate safe reporting and complaint mechanisms. And we also are in contact with representatives of institutions like the Labor Inspectorate, embassies, and representatives of the Ministry of Social Affairs and Foreign Affairs. So it's good to give our input and advocate for changes in policy and legislation. So collaboration with the migrant domestic workers is important to know the challenges you're facing and also the demands that you're taking, that you have to bring them up in these lobby actions. And we can also think about joint petitions, things like that. And besides joining forces on advocacy on a more practical level, as said, Fair Work offers support to people facing severe forms of labor exploitation. And through our website, you can contact our cultural mediators that speak different languages. And that can also help in individual cases. And also at international level, we are active, but that Suzanne will explain a little bit more about, I guess. So, thank you.
Thank you, Franny. So it is so the support for domestic workers, it is a high priority then for Fair Work as an organization. And what you are saying here is that you are very much willing as an organization to support domestic workers in all sort of advocacy actions. And if it's necessary, also to talk with potential decision makers, such as Dutch politicians. Sarah, could you tell us a little bit about your work with the Clara Beckman Foundation, and how do you see your role in supporting the domestic workers, and how do you see that perspective from the organization as well?
Yes, thank you for the invitation. We are approaching this topic from a women point of view, because we see the significant gender inequality. We support the domestic workers in 3 ways. Further research to see what kind of policy options are available in other countries, so we can try to recommend the better options to the government. And second, we are doing a court case at this moment where we are trying to change the legal position of a domestic worker. Because in the Netherlands, we have the regulation dienstverlening aan huis, and it works in the form of exemptions from the Dutch labor rights in the civil code. And it excludes social entitlements to the domestic workers. So we are trying to change that with this court case. We are expecting end of September, there will be a court hearing, and then it will be followed up with a court ruling. And we are very curious. And we have good lawyers, but the case is very, very complicated. But we are trying to get good recommendations after the ruling. And 3, we support the FNV, of course, and other organizations that raise awareness. And we try to raise awareness as well in our own alliances, and that are mostly women organizations.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. So that is actually, that takes us to one of the questions also that have been asked in the Q&A. Maite asked about how can we work further to challenge the government of the Netherlands to recognize equal citizens' rights for all people, included undocumented migrant domestic workers. And I will say, fighting it from all different angles. I will say, fighting it as it is a woman issue, it is a workers issue, it's a society issue. It is not an issue of a small group. It is an issue that affects millions of lives of the Dutch people actually as well. It is it's the struggle and the right for workers' right, but it's also the right for women to participate more openly in the labor market. So we all need, this is an issue that affects women. It's an issue that affects undocumented workers. This is an issue that affects workers in general in this country. So it is much more than just a few domestic workers. It is a society issue. Thank you, Sarah. So, Susan, can you tell us a little bit about how do you see your role as an organization, and how could you like to work and collaborate with the Domestic Workers Trade Union in the future?
Yes, thanks very much. And also thanks very much for the invite in general. It's been very, very interesting to listen to you all. I think what the other speakers already said, I think it's very important indeed that you search for cooperation with different movements. Some of the people on the call we have been working with already, and we do know. And what I also noticed over the last years, I'm quite long in the anti-trafficking field, is that luckily, unfortunately, maybe because the situation is so difficult at the moment, also for CSOs, but I see that we start to work much more together. So I think that's a very good opportunity. And I think for domestic workers, it is very good to seek linkages with those who work on the issue of human trafficking and the issue of labor exploitation in general, of course, domestic workers' rights, as you said, and also women's rights. And these are the issues that we also work with. I should say. For those of you who do not know La Strada International, we are an NGO platform, and we comprise 30 NGOs in 23 European countries. So we have quite a large network of NGOs. And we work not only with our members like Werk in the Netherlands, we also have Commence in the Netherlands, but we also have members, for example, like Banyin in Berlin. We have a very active member on domestic workers' rights, which is a Comité contre l'esclavage moderne in Paris. And they have been doing a lot of court cases to prove severe forms of labor exploitation of domestic workers. So we also have a lot of expertise among our memberships, and definitely we can help to research or the evidence that you were looking for. So that's one of the things. We are not following only the domestic workers sector, but it's of course one of the major sector that we follow, because we see how vulnerable it is for exploitation and abuse and human trafficking. And just to say, what we can offer is maybe firstly indeed more evidence and experience using our membership and seeing what is happening in other countries, as you already did today, and share that. Secondly, we can maybe support the advocacy. If I'm thinking about the Netherlands, and I'm actually also based in the Netherlands, but I'm also thinking that, for example, the Netherlands is also very closely monitored on what they do to address human trafficking and also the prevention of human trafficking. And for example, this year and next year, they will be monitored by Greta, the Council of Europe, on how they do address human trafficking. And then this is for sure an issue, the ratification of ILO Convention 189 is one of the things we could push forwards and ensure that it gets there as a recommendation in the Greta report, for example. Next to our membership, we work also very closely with others. PICUM has not yet been mentioned. Werk Belgium was mentioned. They're very active within PICUM as well. And PICUM is the platform for international cooperation on undocumented migrants in Europe. And we work very closely with them on the issue of domestic workers, and they have done a lot at Brussels level in particular, but also at the OEC Council of Europe. Last thing I want to say, and I can share it in the chat if it's still on time, we have done a lot of advocacy. We do try monitoring, but today we launched a statement, and I'm happy that many people on the call have also supported our statement. We submitted the statement to the Council of Europe Parliament, but also to the Council of Europe, to the OSCE, and also to MEPs at European level. And we tried now to really push for ratification. And also we had in total 10 actions to call for. So that's, I think, one of the things, and we are more than happy to continue to support, and where we see that we can share also at the European level more actions by the domestic workers in the Netherlands, we can do so. And also at the international level, we have networks and contacts with trade unions and others. So I'll leave it there because I know you have pressure of time.
Yeah, that is actually, Susan, a great intervention. Thank you very much. So what I am hearing from you is that there is, and from all the other participants, is like the NGO world have a network that have been established there by activists and by all sort of for all sort of activists in different struggles that could be activated also for the struggle of the domestic workers, because like you are all making the connection about how these issues translate into other spheres of life. So you are already seeing the potential of bringing that network to the service of the domestic workers. It could be done locally here at the national politics, but it can also be at the EU level. And that is important because I want to also mention the ITUC collaboration with PICUM and their recent brochure that they produce about how 10 tips or advice for trade unions on how they could incorporate the struggle of undocumented workers as a trade union struggle, which very much, like we say in the Netherlands, if you are a worker, independently of your status, your place is in the union. So I would like to thank you all for this great advice and for illuminating us on how do you see your role here. I know that you can provide even more insight for us today. We are very curious about the results of those court cases that you are you mentioned in the discussion, and this is a great moment for you to get in contact with Renate, with Joy, and with all the other domestic workers that are active here today, exchange contact and integrate organizations in a much more deeper way in the struggle that you have been already been, but like Joy said, this is a struggle for the long term, and we are still on it. So we still very much need Fair Work, La Estrada, and Clara Bickman Foundation. I don't know if perhaps Renate could be, or Joy could mention a few words after what you have heard from the NGOs as a reaction from what they have said to share with your campaign today.
A very short one. We'd like to meet you all again soon to discuss the details on how we are going to collaborate. And also, as what we always shout in the Netherlands, nooit meer onzichtbaar. It means no more invisible, especially for the undocumented. Yeah, we look forward to work with you all with these struggles. And thank you so much for the support, for everything. It really means a lot to us. You have no idea. Yeah, sorry.
Thank you, Joy. That indeed, out of the invisibility, and we are using and creating this webinar today is a platform for the domestic workers to activate and to use. And from here, we are looking forward to hear much more further about your campaign and all your actions and how we can all support you. So we are looking forward to connect with you. Could you please share in the chat, Joy, your social media accounts? And how can we get in contact and follow your actions? So everyone in the webinar can also keep following your actions. This webinar is also available online and can be shared further with other networks. Renata, I don't know if you would like to have any closing words.
If you want me to have some closing words, I have them, Rebecca. Well, I think this was a great meeting, and I think it was a great inspiration for all of us. It's always great to hear stories from colleagues in other countries, and to hear that we fight the same fight, that we can learn from each other, and that we are strong together. So it's always an inspiration to hear this. I think it's good at this 10th anniversary of this convention as FNV to make this new start and to work with all the people that support the domestic workers in the Netherlands to make a plan, to be ambitious, to make sure that next year we can celebrate that the Netherlands has also ratified this convention. And maybe we can make this ambition working for us together with all the ideas and all the inspiration this night has given us. So I wanted to thank you for organizing this, and I wanted to thank all the panel members and all the attendees to be here tonight. And thank you for inviting me.
You're muted, Rebecca.
Yes. No, with these closing words with Renata, we also answered the last questions in our Q&A from Sakiko about what is the FNB plan to reach out and educate the general public. And I will say the plan is to keep working with our allies to strengthen our campaign, to keep mobilizing with our members. And that is the key work here. Thank you everyone for your participation. Thank you for your active participation. Thank you to all our international guests that took the time to come here. Thank you for all the guests from the Netherlands who in a hot night like this one took part of this discussion. It is highly, highly appreciated. From us, Martin van den Bergen and me, Rebecca Pavon, we'd like to extend thank you for all the colleagues also who gave the time to organize this workshop, to the sector also for all your support, and to all the domestic workers that took their evenings to organize this workshop and the participation. Thank you very much. It has been a pleasure, and we look forward to continue supporting you in your struggle and to one day celebrate with you all also for the day of finally the Netherlands ratified. So I would like to close this with this webinar with saying power to the domestic workers. Power to the domestic workers.
And thanks also for translating all the invisible labor tonight.
Thank you, Elvira.
And for the technical support, Jeremy.
And Jeremy.
Well done. Thank you very much,
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.